Hi friends! In one of my previous videos, I shared my language goals for 2025. I'm planning to start 2 new languages from scratch, and one of them is considered one of the most difficult languages to learn. By doing this, I'll bring the total number of languages I speak to 9, or let's say fairly 8 that I can speak at least at a solid B2 level. So far, I speak Russian and Belarusian as my mother tongues, Italian as my second mother tongue, German at C2 level, English at C1 level, Spanish at B1 level, and Hindi at A1 level. In December 2024, I started learning Arabic and Turkish. I'll leave a link below where you can hear me speaking each of these languages. In this video particular, I'm going to share how I learn languages fast and the new techniques I'm planning to use specifically for Turkish and Arabic. As soon as the last time I've learned the language was a couple of years ago. So let's start with the first point, expectations. I started learning Turkish and Arabic at the same time, but used different strategies. After just 1 month of Turkish, I'm finishing the E1 level and can already talk about myself, my job, my personality, what I do during the week, on weekends, and so on. Arabic, for example, has been a completely different experience. It's much harder and it can feel discouraging at the beginning. First of all, comparing different languages, how fast you learn a language. The first thing I recommend is to check how many hours an average person who speaks your native language will need to reach each level in your target language. For example, to get to B2 in Turkish, I would probably need 500-600 hours, but for Arabic it might take twice as long. And if I started French someday, I would likely need just 400 hours because I already speak Italian and Spanish. You also can use ChatGPT to make personalized calculations based on your situation. So here's an example. For example, in my case, I speak Russian, Belarusian, Italian native, Spanish, German, and English. How long does it take? And here, considering my situation, we can see, for example, to reach B2, I would need 500 hours, what is actually around 150 hours less than a typical English speaker. Additionally, it's important to take into consideration your personal situation. For example, I have a really good visual memory. When I read something in Turkish, I memorize things 2-3 times faster than I do it in Arabic because Turkish uses the Latin alphabet. Reading in Arabic takes more effort and time for me. That's why it's important not to expect the same progress and the same speed from every language you learn. It might be different. So it doesn't depend on you, but on the language itself. The second point are sounds and pronunciation. I've noticed a big difference between learning Turkish and Arabic in my case, especially when it comes to sounds and pronunciation. I often watch Turkish series and movies, mostly with subtitles, and this helped me a lot. It's actually how I learned Hindi and Spanish. And when I watch movies, I try to imitate phrases even if I don't know how to write them yet. And in Turkish, just from watching movies, I started to understand how the language works. Without studying much about grammar, about structure of the language and so on. I picked up on things like suffixes for I, you, he or she, and I figured out how to form past, present and future tenses. Arabic, on the other hand, has been more challenging. Also because I've never had the same exposure to the language. Now, the sounds are much harder to replicate and the grammar structure is more complex for me. I also love listening to music in different languages and I think that it can help you a lot. For example, I sing along even if I don't fully understand the words. Also when I drive the car, for example. So if you enjoy the music, you can try imitating songs and sounds. It can be a really fun way to learn a language. And one last point about pronunciation. For most languages, I would say you can pick up it just by listening. But for example, with Arabic, it's a bit different. Arabic has so many similar sounds that are also really strange to an European ear, and we are just not used to them. The tricky part is that if you pronounce them incorrectly, you can completely change the meaning of a word. For languages with challenging sounds, like Arabic or maybe Chinese, I would recommend taking a few lessons with native speakers right at the beginning. They can help you make sure you're pronouncing things correctly from the start, and that you won't say a wrong thing like heart instead of dog like in Arabic. The third point is write and speak from the first lessons. The hardest part of learning any language is speaking it. You might understand everything when you read it or even when someone talks to you. But when it's your turn to speak, it feels impossible. Sounds similar, right? It does to me. It happened to me with every language I've learned, even with my mother tongue. Yes. If you don't actively use language or only use it for daily basics, it can feel hard to talk about more complex topics. Now, imagine doing that in a completely new language. So, as soon as you've got a little vocabulary, I would say around of the middle of E1 level, start talking at least to yourself. Start to write a diary. Take what you've written in your textbook or pick a simple text for your level, for example for E1, read it and try to rephrase it in your own words. I'll also show you how I do it with ChatGPT, and it can work for every language. So friends, I would like to show you how you can use ChatGPT for your English learning. For example, if you have E1 level, you can ask ChatGPT to write you text or story adapted to your level of English. For example, a day at the park. It's a sunny day. Anna wants to go to the park. As you can see, very simple grammar structures. I particularly use it for Turkish. I think it writes the same text as in English. Yeah, it's another text. Ali ve kedi. Ali küçük bir çocuk, bir gün, blah blah blah. So you can also ask, for example, to write you a story when you're in the shop or when you're in the park or when you're in your family and so on. And I think it can be very useful for for language learning. If you, however, can afford professional materials, there are a lot of books tailored to specific levels. For Turkish, for example, I use the Yunus Boost series. There are books for A1, A2, B1, and B2 levels. Why is writing or speaking so important? Here's an example. When I review words in my notebook or on flashcards, I can recall their meaning quickly, less than a second sometimes. But applying them in conversation, that's a whole other challenge. It's like cooking, you know? You can't learn to cook by just reading recipes. You have to actually try cooking to get it right. It's the same with the language. You need to practice it. And one last thing about writing, always write by hand. It's my recommendation to you. When you write by hand, your focus is sharper and you process information more deeply. Your brain can memorize better this way. Writing out 5-10 sentences by hand is more effective than typing 2 pages on your computer. The next tip is make ChatGPT your best friend. As I mentioned earlier, ChatGPT is super useful for creating text tailored to your language level. I use it to learn new vocabulary from text or when I'm reading or watching something and need to translate it. And why do I use ChatGPT instead of, for example, Google Translator or DeepL? Well, the little two, I would say, are fine for simple words, but when it comes to colloquial expressions or more difficult meanings or political stuff and so on, they often miss the mark. Here I prepare for you an example in German, Ampelbruch. When I see it with DeepL, it translates me to traffic light break politics. I don't know what does it mean. The same thing also happens with Google Translate, but let's see if ChatGPT makes it correctly. If you can see, ChatGPT translates in the same way, but it explains that actually it symbolizes the problem, the politics between 3 main parties in Germany: red, yellow, and green. And another thing I love about ChatGPT is how it adapts its examples based on your level. When you're just starting out, your grammar is basic and you need simplified examples. Even if your grammar knowledge is minimal, a rich vocabulary can still help you communicate about many topics, so concentrate on it. And that's why we're going to talk about grammar. Grammar comes last. When I learned Italian, I never studied grammar at first. I spent summers as a child with an Italian family and nobody taught me grammar. They just taught me vocabulary. I could watch movies and read complex texts and understand them almost perfectly. And I didn't start studying grammar until I was 18. By then, I had a strong vocabulary and a very great pronunciation. For me, it's not enough to just understand the language. I want to speak it, and I want to speak it fast. But because I'm a bit of a perfectionist, I also want to speak it properly. That's why I only study now only 1 or 2 grammar rules a week. Then I spend the whole week applying those rules, using new vocabulary to build sentences and practice structures based on what I learned, or which grammar structures I learned. And here's an important point. You can learn 10 grammar rules in a day, but if you don't use them or don't have enough vocabulary to apply them, they're pointless. That's why I believe less is more in this case. Introducing grammar in small doses makes it easier to actually use it and to get used to the grammar. Let's talk now about a study plan. I highly recommend having a study plan. Without direction, you don't have a destination. Some people like to split their week, for example, 3 days for Italian or 3 days for Arabic. Others divide by skill, for example, Monday for listening, Tuesday for reading, and so on. I personally don't like to plan like that. I prefer to balance my day with a bit of everything: speaking, reading, and writing, and once a week learning a new or 1 grammar rule or 2 new grammar rules. For me, it's important to stay in contact with the language daily in all its aspects. I also try to focus on 1 random topic per week, but I found that using textbooks organized by levels, like starting from A1 to C2, works better for me. These books are designed by professionals and they help you progress logically while choosing useful topics. And I usually work with more than 1 textbook and stick to 1 topic for example, 7 or 10 days. Could I go faster? Sure, but the quality of my learning wouldn't be the same. For example, let's say the Istanbul Turkish textbook has 6 topics for A1 level. With 1.5 hours of study per day, I would need about 60 days or 2 months to complete the first level. And here is how I organize my study. So, firstly, I'll write down the materials I will use as my main source for each topic. Then, when I have time, even if I only have 5 minutes, I add extra resources like a YouTube video, a movie with subtitles, or a song, and so on. That's how I stay consistent when making my learning enjoyable and effective. And maybe it can be also very helpful for you. And now the last point, Italki. I'll be honest, I never used Italki before, because in the past actually didn't exist. But now I can confidently say I'm a big fan of it. I was really lucky to find an amazing Turkish teacher, Emre, on the platform. And in my opinion, it's important and also easier to learn a language with its values and culture. So much of the language, for example, expression, grammar structures, and even how people use it, comes from cultural influences. And this kind of understanding just can come from a book. Because, languages are like living creatures. They grow, change, and evolve. That's why having contact with a native speaker from the very beginning can be incredibly helpful to learn a language. It doesn't have to be Italki or similar platforms. For example, in Arabic, I practice mostly with my business partner and his family. And I had also some lessons on Italki because, first of all, of the complexity of the language. And it was very interesting with Arabic. It's like learning 2 languages at once. Modern Standard Arabic MSA and a spoken dialect, since nobody really speaks pure MSA in daily life. This is why I find working with native speakers especially important for such languages. It might also work maybe for Chinese or similar languages. And I also thought that as I progress, I'll start focusing more on speaking specific lessons rather than general ones. This makes, in my opinion, more sense starting at a 2 level, since before that you don't have actually as much to say, and regular lessons already provide enough practice at E1 level. If these tips were useful for you, you might love particularly the video about how I learned German and the video about how I learned Spanish. Thank you for watching me. Gracias, teşekkürler, vielen Dank, and we'll see each other in the next video. Bye!